We have a quorum. I just wanted to point out we have a quorum with Allison and John.
Thank you, Anthony. I'd like to call this meeting together. It is a decision and discussion concerning the consideration of a temporary suspension of A&E towing from the wrecker rotation. Anthony, would you fill us in with some information, please?
So essentially, the issue that we're dealing with is Nick Hall was working as a police officer for, I'm sorry, let me back up a second. Nick Hall, who is a Fayette County Sheriff's deputy, was working as a police officer for the city of Montgomery. And he responded to a motor vehicle accident. When he arrived at the motor vehicle, and this took place on February 26th of 2025, so yesterday, according to the complaint that was filed by Officer Hall, he responded to the accident. The owner of the vehicle involved in the accident requested a tow truck and requested specifically that Hutch's Wrecker Service respond to assist the owner of the vehicle. So while everyone was at the accident scene waiting, A&E towing arrived on scene. According to the complaint, Officer Hall spoke with Earl Manley, who was the owner-operator of an A&E, and basically, Officer Hall asked why Mr. Manley was dispatched. Mr. Manley stated he was contacted by Chief Paris Workman to respond to the accident. Officer Hall advised Mr. Manley that Hutch's Wrecker Service was taking both of the vehicles pursuant to the request of the owners. At this point, it says Mr. Manley turned his rollback around, proceeded down Route 61, pulled off, and then basically he then turned it around and parked behind one of the vehicles that was sitting on the shoulder there. He then Mr. Manley got out of his vehicle, approached the scene of the accident. Officer Hall approached Mr. Manley and began to speak with him. At this point, Mr. Manley became extremely belligerent and basically started claiming that he was being screwed over by Officer Hall, the Fayette County Commission, Hutch's Wrecker Service. Officer Hall advised Mr. Manley he was not going to tolerate his behavior, asked him to return to his vehicle and leave. Mr. Manley became belligerent again and continued to yell, pointing his finger at Officer Hall. He again asked Mr. Manley to get back to his vehicle and leave. And apparently at this point, Mr. Manley began screaming and cussing and stated he wasn't going anywhere. And Mr. Manley then poked Officer Hall in the chest. So at this point, Mr. Manley was advised by Officer Hall he was being arrested. And when Officer Hall went to take Mr. Manley into custody, he pulled away from Officer Hall and he began to resist being cuffed and refused to place his hands behind his back. There is a video that we believe was taken by one of the Montgomery Fire Department firefighters that shows Mr. Manley basically wrestling with Officer Hall and two or three other individuals, and they're trying to get Mr. Manley under control and trying to get him in handcuffs. So essentially what the net result of all of this was, Officer Hall ended up charging Mr. Manley with battery on a police officer, obstructing, and disorderly conduct. Mr. Manley posted bond and is at this point out on bond, and the charges are pending in Fayette County Magistrate Court. under the Fayette County wrecker and towing rotation policy, there is a provision, excuse me, there is a provision that specifies under the under subsection 8, grounds for removal and suspension. And in the third paragraph, or in the third section underneath, it basically says wrecker service will be removed from the rotation list if wrecker operator obstructs the emergency scene, argues, or attempts to fight with any emergency service personnel at the scene of the call. Clearly, Mr. Manley's behavior falls into this category. In reading the complaint, I can say that on its face, it sets forth sufficient basis for Mr. Manley to be convicted of battery on a police officer and obstructing. The disorderly conduct, which is the least serious of the offenses, I don't know whether, honestly, I don't think the complaint is sufficient to support a conviction for disorderly conduct, but it's clearly sufficient to support a conviction for the two more serious of the charges, those being the battery on a police officer and the obstructing. So I believe at this point, if the county commission wants to take action against Mr. Manley's wrecker company, I think we have a basis to do so based on the behavior of Mr. Manley yesterday and the fact that these criminal charges are pending.
Thank you, Anthony. Commissioner Taylor?
Well, it's my view, and I discussed this with Anthony a little bit earlier, and Anthony, thank you for laying it all out for us like that. I really don't like to take permanent action based on allegations, despite how well documented these are, and they are. I have viewed the video, and as a criminal attorney, I have reviewed the criminal complaint, and I agree with Anthony on this. I do think, though, we do need to take some a temporary action pending the outcome of the criminal case, and then we need to revisit it once that criminal case is resolved. But at this time, I believe we need to temporarily suspend Mr. Manley from the wrecker rotation pending the outcome of that criminal case. And once we have that, I think we're going to need to consider whether we want to permanently suspend or suspend for a certain length of time, and any conditions, that he would have to meet in the meantime, like an anger management course or some kind of programming that Day Report Center or somebody else could provide, because that behavior was unacceptable. There was an accident scene. There were 2 vehicles involved, and he created another problem there. And I think that's, something that we can't tolerate.
Correct.
So I'm going to move that
With
we
everything-
temporarily suspend Mr. Manley. Go ahead, John. I'm sorry. Got a delay here.
Yeah, Mr. Manley is the owner. I would like to make an amendment to Commissioner Taylor's recommendation and actually do a temporary suspension of A&E towing from the wrecker rotation.
Yes.
I agree. Yeah, and I agree. I was going to
Yeah,
point that out. I think John's amendment is appropriate.
I agree with it as well.
Okay, then with the amend, I will second the motion. All those in favor?
Well, wait a second.
Aye. What?
So you're asking that the motion be amended, and Allison, you're amending your original motion to include John's request?
Correct. I move that
Okay.
we suspend or
Okay.
temporarily suspend A&E towing from the wrecker rotation pending the outcome of the criminal case
Okay. And John,
related to this
second-
incident.
And John, you second the
John
motion?
will second. Yes.
Okay.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Okay, with that said, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Okay, this Go ahead.
I would just like in the intervening time, Anthony, if your office could keep us up to date on what happens with the criminal case, since it sounds like you guys will
I'll
be
let-
prosecuting it.
Yeah, I'll let everybody know.
Okay, and my other request of Tanja, I'd like to have an understanding of how many companies we have serving the valley and kind of the number of calls that each of those services go on to help inform our future decision after the criminal case is resolved.
Okay, I can get those to you. John actually has, I send them to him every month, so he has those stats probably for about a whole year now.
Yeah, he mentioned that. If you could resend them just to make sure we all three commissioners have them, a copy,
will.
Anthony and Ruth, I appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to move we adjourn.
Second, and thank you everyone for your time.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Bye-bye.